Hello and welcome to The Direct Approach with Wayne Moorehead, an exclusive podcast by DSN where Wayne shares candid and insightful conversations with leading corporate executives about today's evolving direct sales channel. Tune in every other Thursday for timely insights and relevant takeaways to grow and advance your business. In today's episode, Wayne is joined by Will Templeton, Director of the Global Amway brand, CSR, and Sustainability. As director of the Global Amway brand, Will has supported Amway's value in each affiliate market worldwide through environmental sustainability efforts and social impact. Today, Will talks about the emotional nature of a brand, what it takes to bring it to life, the importance of personalization for customers, and why traceability and sustainability are must-haves for every business today. Plus, he shares how companies can start impacting their communities. We know you'll learn so much from these insights. And to learn even more from some of the top executive leaders across the channel, we invite you to attend the Spring 2023 DSU in-person events on Tuesday, April 18th through Thursday, April 20th in Frisco, Texas. Be in the room and part of the conversations that help drive progress and evolution for the greater good of the entire channel. Learn from 30 subject matter experts and direct selling executive leaders from companies like Red Aspen, Prove It, Market America, Beauty Counter, Faster Way to Fat Loss, PM International, Pharmacy, LifeWave, Advocare, and more, all sharing their insights, expertise, and learnings. Plus, don't miss the digital selling workshop, The Next Revolution, focused on the here, now, and future of digital and social selling. The workshop takes place Wednesday, April 19th, following the DSU general session, and is open to all DSU registered attendees. Visit dsu2023.com to register for the events and for all the details. Before we begin, DSN is honored to be supported by industry suppliers that partner with companies across the channel to help enhance, streamline, and grow your businesses. This episode's sponsor is InfoTrax. When rapid growth or international expansion place demands on your business your systems aren't prepared to handle, success itself can be a potential cause of failure. As you grow, your system's requirements change, and nothing is worse than being hard-coded into a corner. The InfoTrax platform was built with growth in mind, allowing the freedom to adjust your system at any time to align with your current business needs. Learn more at infotraxsys.com. That is InfoTraxsys.com. Please help me welcome your host, Wayne Moorehead, and today's guest, Will Templeton, Director of the Global Amway brand, CSR, and Sustainability.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. I am your host, Wayne Moorehead, and today I am fortunate to be joined by someone that has spent 24 years at the largest direct selling company in the channel. He started out in the UK as part of the European marketing team. He transferred to Amway's World HQ in Ada, Michigan in 2004, and he has spent the majority of his time there working across all product categories, leading product development, brand positioning, communication, marketing research, and others. Currently, he is the Global Amway Brand Director, and I'm talking about none other than Will Templeton. Will, thank you so much for being here on Direct Approach.
Wayne, thanks for having me.
I am really excited for this conversation. As I've mentioned before, I really haven't had a chance to interview somebody that is purely in a brand role. I've spent time in a brand role on the agency side, as well as on the brand or the company side. And so I am so excited to talk to somebody that kind of speaks my language. I feel like sometimes us brand people kind of wander around corporate trying to find people that relate to us and speak our language. And so I'm excited for this conversation and to dig deep. But before we get started, do you mind taking a few minutes sharing with us the path that led you into direct selling and into Amway specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, I joined Amway back in the UK in 1999. And Amway in the UK was a pretty well-established business, but a fairly small business and not particularly well known. So I had to do some research to really understand what I was getting into with direct selling and Amway specifically. And then once I joined, I spent 5 years in the UK working across our different product categories, looking at product development, looking at branding, communications, and then had the awesome opportunity to transfer over to headquarters, where I've been ever since, despite the Michigan weather.
Brand, I think, has become increasingly more important over the years as far as a differentiator, customer facing, but also internally as kind of a guide. We talk a lot about operationalizing the brand, how that becomes the anchor and helps to inform everything that people do internally, that the field does, and externally as well. Sometimes brand sits in different parts of the organization. It can be on the sales side, sometimes it's on the marketing side, sometimes it's standalone. Can you tell us a little bit about your role as global brand director and where it sits in the Amway organization?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Our product brands, so we have a family of product brands that represent all of our different product categories. They sit within marketing. I lead what we call Amway brand, or our master brand, and I sit in our communications group. And so under the master Amway brand, which really represents, who we are and what we offer, I like to say is all the fun stuff. It's all the emotional stuff. It's all the goodwill, the social impact, the environmental sustainability. And so I'm responsible for that team here at our headquarters, and we partner with the different Amway brand teams in our markets around the world.
Well, it's really interesting to have it sitting there in communications. It does make sense in such a large organization to have it there as this kind of centralized role that does kind of guide and stretch across all the different functions. You mentioned something really interesting to me that kind of got my antennas up as a brand person. You talked about the emotional nature of brand. A lot of marketing is transactional. It's focused on the customer. It's focused on the conversion. It's all about the purchase and then kind of finding the new customer, filling that funnel. And so it can be looked at sometimes as kind of this immediate, very transactional function. Yet on the brand side, especially in brand marketing and brand management, it can be about the emotion. And it's also more of the long-term play. So marketing or even performance marketing is kind of that short-term, immediate transactional, but brand takes that long-term approach. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that Amway does and you do in your role that really helps to bring the Amway brand to life for employees and the field and customers around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on, particularly in a market like the US, which, I would argue is probably the most sophisticated and competitive consumer market in the world. And consumers have so much choice. And for sure, when they're looking for a product, does it make my skin feel moisturized? Does it clean my kitchen the way I want it to be cleaned? There is so much choice out there that the brand really has to step up and fill that gap. And when we think about the brand, it's the overall experience. Is the customer service there? Does the product arrive when I expect it? Is it in good condition when it's there? And then increasingly, it's going beyond that into more of the, what I would call purpose-driven space. What does the company do in terms of environmental sustainability? What does the company do in terms of giving back or social impact? How are they helping worthy causes around the world? And increasingly, I think with younger consumers especially, that becomes a very important purchase driver. So those are the components that we can kind of control from the corporation's perspective, right? We can make sure that we deliver that overall experience, that we're offering a brand that a consumer can see themselves representing, that they can see themselves being like-minded with. But for me, in our channel, and certainly for Amway, the secret sauce is really about our independent business owners, the field and the connections that they make. I talked a bit about how competitive, how sophisticated the marketplace is, and how important personalization has become. And really, I think that's the secret sauce for us. That's what sets us apart, is the ability for our business owners to really deliver that personalization, that customization for a consumer. I was listening to one of the conversations you had earlier with Garrett McGrath, and you were talking about...
love Garrett.
Right. It was awesome. And you were talking a little bit about the onboarding process of new distributors coming into the company, right? And something he said really stuck with me. And it was something along the lines, I'll paraphrase, but it's not about how much love you show them, but it's about how much love they feel. And that really, for me, speaks to those deep personal connections. that our independent business owners are making with their community of customers, with their downlines, with their organization. I think about the best CRM platform on the planet with all the data in the world can't get you to that deep personal connection that the field are making. They don't know if, your mum is sick, or if your kid has just started college and you're not sure how you're going to pay for it, or if you're struggling with something and you just need those few extra words of encouragement. And for me, that's the secret sauce to the Amway brand.
That's really interesting. You said so much there. I want to circle back on a couple of these elements and dig in a little bit deeper. You talked about kind of the functional benefits of products. Does it deliver on the benefits that it says it does? Is it providing value and utility from a functional standpoint? And I think in today's world, and especially in certain markets, not to discount any of our products, in any of our companies across the entire channel, it's probably more possible than it ever has been for someone to find replacement for those functional benefits. And if someone is one step ahead of another brand, is it 12? Is it 18 months before a competitive brand can come along and at least offer kind of that same benchmark of functionality and functional utility? But you talked about the emotional benefits. And I think that is, as you mentioned, where brand comes in really is this great differentiator, because someone might be able to find functional benefits or maybe an income from another company, but they can't find that brand. And what I mean by that, it's not the logo, as you know, it's not the look and feel. Again, this is something that you've talked about extensively. It really is about this kind of connection that we make emotionally with a service, with a company, with a product. And it helps us kind of connect with each other. It helps us identify. It's part of how we signal, what tribe, I'm using that term in quotes, but, what tribe we're a part of here. And that's why I think that sometimes the brand or the emotional benefits get underplayed, where we talk so much about, hey, our product does A, B, and C, and there's IP on this, and it's patent pending, and here's all this great stuff, these amazing, unique and novel ingredients. But we forget that the connection really comes from a brand, which that's across touch points, and product is just one of them. But what are some of the ways that Amway has approached defining the brand, especially kind of on the emotional side? Is it kind of a stake that you put in the ground once and you kind of move away from, and this is who we are and we never change? Or there at Amway, do you revisit it occasionally and say, look, are we still positioned right? Is the brand, still delivering on its promise the way that it should, or do we need to make adjustments from that?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there.
I know. Sorry, that I kind of wound it up there.
No, it's
so I
great.
guess more focusing on the process. Like how does Amway approach the brand, how it's positioned, and how often, or does it revisit it occasionally to see if it's still resonating with the field and consumers today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we consider ourselves an entrepreneur-led health and wellness company. Our mission, succinctly put, is to help people live better, healthier lives. Right? So we help people. We do that, whether that's through economic empowerment, through the business opportunity, whether that is through health and wellness products and solutions to help improve their health or the health of their customers. We do that through how those products are curated responsibly and thinking about the impact to the environment and the planet. And then we do that in terms of how we treat people, whether that's employees, our business owners, our customers, and how we give back to the communities where we are, how we show up in those communities. In terms of our brand positioning and our messaging and how locked that is, there are certain components that will always remain the same, that have been set in stone since Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel established the company. Our values, our mission, who we are, how we show up. Absolutely. They remain a constant for us. We do periodically go back and reevaluate the value proposition, whether that is as a business opportunity for potential business owners, or whether that is the value that we're providing through our solutions and programs and products to potential customers. So we do go back and check in with the ever-changing marketplace, the way companies are going to market, the way we are supporting our business owners. That needs to be just double-checked every so often. And that reflects how the messaging, the outwardly facing campaigns, the communication might come to life in different markets. So certainly there are certain constants, but there are also things where we'll go back and double-check and say, does this need a tweak?
I love that. I think it's important to have those kind of fixed as well as flexible elements to the brand. And I do think it's so important, especially from a founder-led perspective, where there are these constants, these anchors, these handholds that we have that don't change, that really serve as this platform to build from, not to kind of move away from, but to really build from. But maybe how we discuss it or communicate it might need to change, just with the, as you mentioned, the ever-changing consumer or field representative. But I love that there are these fixed things that you and all the employees know. You can count on us for this. These values, this mission, this vision, this is never going to change. But maybe how we go about bringing that to life or how we communicate it externally may change. I think it's so important. You mentioned one of the ever increasingly important elements of a brand, especially with today's consumers and distributors and promoters, is around corporate social responsibility. What is the company doing? What is the impact that it's making on the environment, on people's lives? And customers and distributors today are very discerning. They will take the time to find out what's behind a brand, what's behind a product. Can you share some of the efforts that Amway is doing today from a CSR perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're fortunate at Amway that it's kind of always been part of our DNA. It's always been a part of how we show up in the communities where we are. We like to think about our social impact or corporate social responsibility efforts in terms of where we have expertise or credibility. So we have, over the years, had global programs when we're driving a significant impact, where we have everybody focused on the same program. Today, we're much more focused on this kind of idea of flexibility within a framework. So we are a health and wellness company, and we're entrepreneurial-led. We have expertise in health and wellness, and we have expertise in this space of empowerment or lifting people up. And what we found is that around the world, in our different countries, our business owners and our employees have passion for causes that are in their backyard. And that's what we want to support. You know, it's important to them, so it's important to us. So we try to stay within this space of health and wellness, specifically access to nutrition for underserved populations, but also around empowerment, whether that is economic, whether that's educational. And so our efforts today are very much focused in that space. In the US, we've had long-standing partnerships with Easter Seals and US Dream Academy, when they both fit very firmly in that space of empowerment.
That's really interesting. I think that gets back to that message around personalization. I think being in HQ, we can be pretty myopic at times. And, here's our one, philanthropic, organization that we're going to contribute to, and it's located far around the world. And, maybe at, once in a field leader's life or tenure, they could get to that spot, maybe more often. But for the average promoter or field representative, it's going to be very infrequent, probably if ever. And so giving the markets that flexibility to take the mission and apply it locally, I think is a really interesting way to just reinforce what you discussed around personalization, even at the market and the distributor level for them, and allow them to have more consistent connection and interactions with that organization and those opportunities to really give back and have an impact. And I know in my life and in my career, just those efforts alone were some of the things that helped us to retain members. They fell in love with some of these efforts that we had. And so having it be local, I think, is an amazing way to really help bring it to life and to personalize for the employees there as well as the field. I think that's really fascinating. So with that kind of field perspective that you had starting in the UK, was that a meaningful difference for you as a corporate leader there, being able to do something just, in your own backyard instead of traveling half a world away?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want to show impact. We want to show up and add value to the communities where we are, right? And, every community around the world have social challenges. And so there's an opportunity to really give back locally. That was a huge pull for me. At the time, our European team were partnering with UNICEF. And so we got to have an impact specifically in Europe. So that's certainly a pull for me. I think it's certainly a pull for the altruistic nature of many of our business owners who, once they have experienced success for themselves, really want to give back. and having that flexibility or the platform to be able to do that, and having a company that really supports and empowers that and encourages it is a really powerful thing. And I think that speaks to the tenure both of our business owners, but also of our employees.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned the employees as well, because, they have choice as well and where they work and how long they're going to stay somewhere. And a company that does give back, that makes a social impact, is so important to employees today, from attracting and retaining. So I think that's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that.
It's so important to our owners that we support our employees in giving back to their communities, that we actually have a platform where any employee, regardless of where they are either donating or volunteering hours, they can log those and we offer a company match. So we will then donate to that cause on their behalf as well.
Oh, that's amazing. So what are some of the other ways that you're able to bring this to life for distributors, for employees? How do you involve them in these efforts?
It varies around the world. We have events that we coordinate as the company, if you like, that we invite our distributors to come to and participate, but we also support them in their activities. So if a certain group have a very specific cause that they want to support, we will support them with that, whether that's materials, communications, assets, and help them capture that story so that they can share that story more broadly with other people that might be interested in joining their group.
That's really interesting. So how do these efforts kind of impact and inform how Amway does business in general? And I know that's kind of a high level question, but how does that impact, annual planning, strategy? What are some of the ways that it informs how Amway does business?
Well, I think that's really a two-way street. So I think, as I said, we have expertise in those spaces of health and wellness and empowerment. And that informs the areas in which we encourage our corporate social responsibility or social impact efforts to happen. And then the success or the impact of those also helps us to kind of share best practices, have that ripple effect, so that when we have success in one part of the country or one market, we're able to share that story, able to share how that was brought to life, how it was executed, and then other markets and other parts of the country will adopt that and roll it out, so that it's kind of like a ripple effect where it continues to grow.
Oh, I love that. I love that you kind of talked about providing the guardrails for kind of what and how, the different areas that we look at, and then leave it up to the markets and then to the individuals on really bringing that to life and how it gets executed. That's really interesting. So we talked earlier about today's consumer, today's distributor or promoter, and how they're much more savvy than they ever have been. So not only do they look into a brand and what it does, but also into the products and the ingredients and the manufacturing and the supply chain. And I know Amway has gone to really great lengths and has done another amazing job of setting an example for so many in the channel around transparency and sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about Amway's efforts around these areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see those two areas as almost brother and sister. So we tease the two apart. I know many people think of them as interchangeable, but maybe I'll talk about transparency first. We have a signature traceability program, which is really vertical integration. And that was born out of our Nutrilite brand in 2018. And for there, we can really show and track every step of the process, where we start with growing ingredients on our own certified organic farms, all the way through processing, manufacturing, and distribution. And we can show the quality checks that happen in every step of that process. And we've taken that program and actually expanded it to other brands in our portfolio. So it's become very much an Amway signature program. For us, there are some parts of the world where adulteration, contamination can be a very real concern. And that program can give consumers real peace of mind that they're getting a pure, safe, and effective product. I think in other parts of the world, maybe in the West, like the US, where it's much more of a consumer's right to know, right? They want to know where those ingredients have come from, how they were processed, why they're in the product, what role they're playing, how the people that were treated in that supply chain in securing those ingredients, to make sure that they can feel good about the products that they're buying and consuming. So that's really our traceability program. When I say they're almost brother and sister with sustainability, it's because they will show elements of our enterprise sustainability in every step of that process. And it becomes an incredibly powerful storytelling tool for our business owners to be able to give that reassurance to their customers that every step of the process is guaranteeing purity, safety, and effectiveness in the products.
That's really powerful. How do you, from a corporate standpoint, communicate this to the field and then empower them to communicate it to the consumers? What have you seen work really effectively? I mean, it's a pretty complex story, with lots of different steps all along the way, all along the value chain. What have you found most successful in teaching and communicating to the field on how they then in turn communicate this?
What's been real powerful for us actually is a web experience that we developed. You can see it at neutralitetraceability.com. But that's an interactive experience where you can walk through every step of the process, double click and look at an ingredient for a specific product and find out more about where it came from, the farmers that were involved, how it was processed. And we've really empowered our business owners with that content to say, this is for you. Go out and use it with your prospects, with your customers, and use this as a way to show all the care and attention and the extra steps that we are taking to make sure that there's a high quality product at the end of it.
That's really interesting. You mentioned kind of some of the variation or perceptions across the globe. I'm curious as it relates to communicating this level of sustainability and intimacy that you have in the supply chain and manufacturing. Is this kind of a nice to have in today's world, or is this a have to have with today's consumer and distributor to have this level of care around traceability and sustainability?
For us, it's a must to have. Absolutely. I think it's imperative that we are, asking our independent business owners to represent our brand. We're asking you to represent Amway. And in return, Amway in a way is representing them. Right? They are the face of that representation. So this is our way of ensuring that we will operate with integrity, that we will never cut corners, that we will go the extra step all the time so that they can have confidence that the brand they're representing is going to support their own reputation.
As you look down the road 5 years or 10 years with how far Amway has come and achieved and really led out in these areas, do you see, is there still kind of a long way to go? Is this kind of an ongoing process, or let's say from a sustainability standpoint, is there kind of an ultimate goal around sustainability? Or do you feel that where Amway is at now is really kind of meeting the criteria and the mission for Amway as a whole?
Well, for environmental sustainability, that's an incredibly broad and complex topic, right? I think it's very easy for people to take well-intentioned actions over here and have kind of negative unintended consequences over here. So for us, it's always been part of who we are. We've always used our own certified organic farms to grow our own ingredients. Back when Neutralite was first formed in 1934, we've continued that journey with organic products, with recycling programs. I think we recognize that it is very much a journey that we are on, that we are probably going to make some mistakes along the way as we learn, and we will adjust based on those mistakes. And similar to our social impact efforts, we've identified the areas where we feel that we have the most opportunity to have an impact, where we have credibility to play in that environmental sustainability space. And for us, where we have true expertise is in organic farming. And so we own and operate around 6,000 acres of our own certified organic farms. And then we also partner with other organic farms around the world for specific ingredients based on where they are in the topography of their farms. We're actually shifting from organic into what's known as regenerative ag, which maintains the same high quality standards of organic, the absence of all pesticides and herbicides, but actually puts more thought into carbon sequestration, keeping carbon in the soil, reducing water usage, reducing wastage in general, improving the health of the soil. And so we're evolving even our organic farming techniques in that space. And of course, looking at our products, the packaging, how can we reduce plastic? How can we choose plant ingredients first as often as possible. And then from an operations point of view, really benchmarking our scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 operations to see where can we make reductions in our impact. And we see that as a continuous journey that we are on for sure, and that we should all be on.
I do think things will always continually evolve. There will be opportunities for us to continue to improve or even at times lessen our impact, in certain areas. And I'm curious how Amway uses this from a communication and field perspective. I wasn't aware that you own farms. I think that's fascinating, not just from a manufacturing and sourcing standpoint, but also from a marketing standpoint. Do you bring field leaders into some of these, whether it's the owned farm or some of these partner farms, or bring them in and let them kind of see some of the manufacturing process? How do you bring kind of additional transparency and experiences to life for your distributors around these efforts?
Absolutely. I mean, the pandemic didn't help us, to be honest. That hindered
Right.
some of those efforts.
Right.
But we offer we call it our traceability experience, where field leaders can fly in and they can go through every step of our traceability experience, all the way from seeing the seed selection on the farm, through choosing the plot, through growing, harvesting, processing, and then they can transfer to our manufacturing facility and see, again, manufacturing process, but importantly, all of the quality inspections that we put in place for them. And we found that to be incredibly impactful for their experience and their storytelling. Obviously, we're limited in terms of how many people we can get to go through that experience. So we augment that with digital experiences as well, virtual reality, web-based experience as well, to really try to bring that to life in as meaningful a way as possible.
Interesting. It is such a powerful experience and such an incredible differentiator from so many other companies that maybe might not follow these standards, or that maybe just buy ingredients or grab things kind of off the shelf. And it's really more of a brand than kind of a product. But when a company digs as deep as Amway has, distributors and customers know that they're able to kind of sniff out, things that are inauthentic a mile away. But when they can come in and experience those processes for themselves, and as you mentioned, kind of add to their own personal story, it does have an incredible impact on the consumer to talk to somebody that has experienced those farms or been in those facilities, even virtually. But to be able to talk to that as an important differentiator, I think is so powerful. So I want to move on. You mentioned environmental, social, and governance as well. And more companies are not just reporting on or focusing on the financial criteria kind of measurement for success, but also the ESG. And can you talk a little bit about how Amway approaches this, how it reports on this, how it discusses and communicates this as a success criteria, just like it would any financial criteria?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, we've been fortunate that the kind of the idea of operating with integrity has always been part of our owner's philosophy. And so making sure that we are giving back, making sure that we are good stewards of the environment, and making sure about the choices that we make in terms of governance has always been there. ESG is a relatively new reporting framework, and certainly there are a few financial implications. But for us, the integrity and the mission or the passion of doing what is right is far more important and far more impactful for our field. So, we touched on environmental sustainability and all the things that we do there, for our social impact as well. Governance is the one that's slightly different for us because we are privately held. And so we took a step back and really looked at how we could form, an assurance guarantee for anybody that wants to start an Amway business or buy a product from Amway. We want them to feel like they've made the best decision they possibly can. And so under that governance space, we've implemented what we call Amway Promise, and that is one of the most robust customer service and consumer protection programs within the industry. And we're very closely aligned to codes of conduct, codes of ethics established by the World Federation of Direct Selling Associations.
That's really interesting. So obviously, as I mentioned, it's very complex, very involved. There's going to be additional cost, of course, to operate at this level. of purity, of integrity. What has been the real impact, do you think, to the bottom line? Yes, there's additional costs above the line, but what has been not, the bottom line impact? Would you be in the same spot, or these have helped kind of fuel Amway's continued growth and continued success?
It's difficult to quantify specific dollars,
sure,
right? But
yep.
The opinion of Will is that the fact that we continue and have always operated with such high levels of integrity, the fact that we are willing to make those investments and those trade-offs against profit to ensure we're doing the right thing by communities, by the planet, that is reflected more in the tenure that we experience here at Amway in terms of our field, our IBOs, and the multi-generational businesses that we see passed down in the field, but also in our employee tenure. As I mentioned, I've worked here 24 years. My wife is also an Amway employee. She's worked here 25 years.
Oh, that's great.
My mother-in-law is actually a business owner. She built a pretty successful Amway business. So we see the business from all angles over many, many years. It makes dinner conversation a little interesting sometimes.
I'm sure.
But certainly the idea that people stay with us, because the fact that we operate with such integrity, that we give back, that's reflected in people's choices. We talked earlier about how much choice consumers have. And that's reflected not only in consumers' choices, but in terms of business owners. Is Amway a business that they want to represent? And for employees, is Amway a company where they want to work and give their career? So for me, it's slightly less tangible, but that's exactly how it's reflected.
Interesting. Well, I would take that bet because I agree. I think that it absolutely has helped, the top and bottom line there at Amway. Yes, there's going to be additional costs, but you're really delivering on a promise and a need and a want to your independent business owners and consumers. And that's ultimately what's going to lead to success. And I think it's so powerful that Amway does take that long-term approach. It would be easy to be a little bit more short-sighted or short-term focus and, potentially cut corners, but you're really playing the long game and investing in the brand and the products and the people, internally and externally. I think that's remarkable and sadly probably rare in a lot of companies today. So thank you again for the example that you've been. So a lot of companies might be new to some of these, terms, ESG and traceability and sustainability. Some are earlier in their life cycle. What are some ways that a company can start to really implement some of these kind of more, responsibility-based elements to their brand and to their company?
Well, I would offer two pieces of advice. One is those areas are incredibly broad and complicated, and don't try to do it all, right? Don't try to boil the ocean. Really pick and choose areas where you feel you can make an impact in the communities where you're present and where you have expertise. And then layering on top of that, you mentioned people. That's so important. Find out what's important to your people and get behind that, stand behind it, and put your efforts in areas that really reflect your people's passion, because that will come back in spades.
It's interesting to have it kind of, be informed also from the employees, that it's not always just kind of handed down and said, hey, this is what we're about, or, what we're going to focus on, but listening to the independent business owners, listening to the employees, making sure that they have a voice. I agree. I think it's going to make them be more invested in the long term there. So I want to shift back into brand for a couple minutes. What do you feel, looking back 24 years there at Amway and in lots of marketing and product and brand roles, what's the best advice you can give a direct selling company to help them build their brand in today's environment?
Well, I think it's stay the course, right? Find out what your unique point of differentiation is and stick with it. I think you mentioned earlier on the idea of pivoting and how so many brands make the mistake of pivoting to different areas based on consumer preference. Really stay true to who you are, operate with integrity, and stay the course of that journey. And know that you're providing some unique value to customers, and that in the longer term, that will pay back for you.
That's great. So one of the challenges that I've experienced in a brand role it's a little more challenging to measure, especially immediately the impact of brand marketing and some of the brand efforts we've spoken to today. I'm envious of the performance marketers who can, talk about on a daily basis what the ROAS was. But how do you go about, in the organization there, communicating the value and the importance of brand building within the organization? Some that maybe aren't or haven't been in that role can look at it and say, oh, those are just, those dollars are kind of nice. We'll allocate them, when available. But really to build a brand for the long term, the way Amway is, requires tremendous amount of investment over the long term. How do you, with even kind of your peers and colleagues, communicate that return and kind of validate that investment?
Yeah, again, I think I'm in a very fortunate spot in that Amway is a very relationship-driven culture, and that is reflected from the importance of the relationship that our business owners have with their groups, with their customers. That relationship is so important for the field that almost transfers for how important the relationships become internally with our employees as well. And so the conversations around how we feel about the brand, how we feel about the organization, the softer measures about the tenure of employees and how people are so desperate to want to come and work at Amway or represent an Amway business, that has transferred into the value of the brand enough so that I don't necessarily have to dig deep into the dollars and cents and the returns on that kind of investment. So I feel very fortunate that I work at a company that values it in that way, but truly blessed to be part of it.
That's really interesting. I agree. There are kind of less traditional indicators around brand lift and brand growth. And I love that you used employee tenure as one of those criteria. I think that speaks a lot to how you lead and how you manage, as well as how Amway as a whole approaches its employees. I think that's amazing. That I don't know if I've been in a meeting where that gets brought up around kind of brand metrics. And I think that you're right. It's probably one of the most important brand metrics to be discussing. So I want to ask a couple questions here, just wrapping up around maybe leadership. So you've been at Amway 24 years now, been in some really amazing roles and geographies. As you look at yourself as a leader today, what are some of the ways you lead differently today than maybe you did earlier in your career?
It's a great question. I wish I had a little bit of wisdom when I was a newer leader and really understood the ability to put myself in other people's shoes more comprehensively, more wholeheartedly. I think as a young leader, I was a little more transactional and not really taking the time to really appreciate the situation that a person is in. Right? What's going on in their personal life, what's going on in their home life, and really creating an environment where they could bring their whole selves to work and be understanding of that. I think over time, I've really grown to appreciate that and take the time to understand their perspective more comprehensively. And I think people is everything. People is so important to us. I was reflecting on a story I heard from Doug DeVos before we started the podcast here. And he always shares a story about how when Amway was starting to experience some early success and a large chemical company here in the US, large corporation, reached out to Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel to see if they could acquire Amway. They were interested in getting into direct selling. They were interested in getting into the home care business. And so Rich and Jay really weren't that interested in selling, but they were kind of curious. And so they met with a representative, and the story goes that, halfway through the pitch and the discussion, that Rich and Jay said, hey, you know what? We're really not interested in selling, but really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you, and thanks for coming out. To which the representative responded, well, if you don't take this offer, we have expertise in this space, and we are going to set up on our own. We'll bring people in who understand the channel. We're going to compete with you, and we're going to beat you. To which Rich and Jay said, well, okay, if that's what you're going to do, here's an Amway starter kit. Here's the sales plan. Here's how we do it. Good luck to you. If you're going to do it right. which was a bold choice, in my opinion. That's probably something I wouldn't have done. And so the story goes, Rich bumps into the chairman of this big chemical corporation many years later at an airport and asks him how it's going, to which the guy responds, well, you know full well, we folded after 3 years. We couldn't make it happen. And Rich was, well, we gave you everything. He said, no, you left something out. There was something that you didn't share. And of course, it's the people. It's how we take care of the people and treat them like family. And I think that's very much the culture that I've experienced over my time at Amway and the culture that we encourage in our leaders.
That's an incredible story. There's so much in there for employees, for independent business owners to learn from, and I think from business builders and marketers to learn from. I love that they took the long-term approach there, that it wasn't about just, generating some revenue and trying to scale up a company and sell it, but about having an impact long-term. And I think also it sounded like in talking with this people, they could hear really early on that it wasn't a fit. Even if they were interested in selling, that once both of those individuals really defined the values, defined the brand, defined the mission, getting back to, all of the kind of the brand side of things, that it's easy to know right away if something is a fit or not. It makes it really easy to say no when you've taken the time to clearly define who you are, why you do what you do, and how you do it differently. And I think both of those individuals have been, an incredible example, over the course of the company's history there. So last question, looking down the road for direct selling, there's been lots of change. We've always talked about the fact that it's changing, but in reality, it really has changed so much in the last few years. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see Amway and the channel 5 years down the road?
Well, honestly, I think it's an exciting time for us. I think the desire for personalization, the desire for customization, beyond the idea that I can go onto a website and order a product, to have an individual who can coach me through, well, this is what happened for me when I took that product, and share that personal experience. I think that becomes increasingly powerful over time. And if we can find the sweet spot behind that personalization, combined with the expansion of social selling and using a digital platform to increase our reach, if we can find that sweet spot, I think the future potential is limitless.
That's beautiful. I agree. I think the community, the personalization, the relationships that Amway and all the companies in direct selling can bring is one of the main reasons people will come to us and continue to come to our companies. Will, thank you so much for your time today. This is incredible. This was an absolute pleasure for me to talk to somebody else on the brand side and really geek out a little bit on the brand. But thank you for all you do. Thank you for the example. And thanks to Amway for being the great company that it is and the example in direct selling.
Thank you, Wayne. Really appreciate talking to you today.
Thank you for tuning in. We invite you to subscribe so that you're the first to know when new episodes are available. We encourage you to reserve your seat today at the Spring 2023 events. Register at dsu2023.com to join your peers in person for all the insights, sharing, and networking taking place April 18th through April 20th in Frisco, Texas. Thank you again for listening and supporting DSN and the Direct Approach podcast.